AI recognizes there are two versions of what is considered the age of the Earth based upon the study of diamonds. The rate, RATE, radioisotopes, and the age of the Earth. Scientists, who are generally associated with creationist viewpoints, found significant radiocarbon C14 in diamonds. This finding was used to argue that diamonds are much younger than the estimated billions of years old by mainstream geology, suggesting an age of around 55,000 years. This aligns with a young Earth perspective, while the conventional view suggests diamonds are much older. So the scientists are conventional view. And then it gives the radiocarbon in a more detailed look of diamonds, and it gives links to according to answers in Genesis for a few of the responses. They consider mainstream scientific explanation, although they don't give the population of how many people out of the 8 billion in the earth believe in the mainstream scientific explanation, although there are billions of people who are believers of the Bible, whether they be Jewish, whether they be Muslim, whether they be Christian, which are the main three faiths of the earth, which consist of those three religions of the earth. There are billions of people that constitutes. So let's see, what does AI consider to be the amount of people who are accepting of the answers in the Bible, of which all three main faiths of the earth do accept, at the very least, the Old Testament pretty much consistently. So let's figure out, what does AI consider to be mainstream in regards to population of people and what they believe. In other words, who is mainstream? Interestingly, when you ask the question, how many people believe in the Old Testament Genesis stories, via the Google search, the AI overview says a significant portion of the population, particularly with religious communities, believes in the stories of Genesis and the Old Testament, even though interpretations may vary. But then it only mentions Americans. It doesn't state like the billions of people around the world, breaking them down by countries. So I think at this point in time, it's a little early for AI to really be able to give an effective answer to this question. But at the very least, it does recognize, when it comes to mainstream versus population, definitely the significant portion of population are believers of the stories of the Genesis and the Old Testament. Now, when you ask a more specific question, who is mainstream when it comes to belief of age of the earth? It literally says that basically the most mainstream religious interpretations agree that the earth is billions of years old, not thousands. Yeah, I don't believe that. So let's figure out where they're getting their information from. How do they know what Christians actually believe? Where they're getting their data? So let's find out. But first, let's read this. It says, the scientific community and most mainstream religious interpretations agree that the earth is billions of years old, not thousands. Scientific evidence, like radiometric dating of rocks, supports an age of approximately 4.5 billion years for the earth. Young earth creationists, however, believe the earth is only a few thousand years old, based on little interpretation of Genesis. So when you ask AI specifically, how does AI know what all religious people believe when it comes to age of earth? It doesn't have an answer. So when you find out who's putting the data in for AI, now AI can be trained basically based on it. Let's just say AI can evolve when it comes to things being inquired. Like, for example, I think it was Elon Musk's specific Grok or whatever basically called Musk somebody who was a misinformation, like the worst of misinformation, just based on searches and comments on the internet. So things that's being collected data-wise. However, when it comes to AI training, there are specific people involved in that in as far as companies, even though it can evolve based on data being collected. Okay, so there's no answer to this particular question. What you get is this says AI does not think like us. David Weinberger says that the belief that the earth is around 6,000 years old is a perspective held by Christians, particularly those who adhere to a literal, although there are some things that are proving, such as the discovery of the blood found in one of the ancient dinosaur species fossils. There's new evidence that they have been finding that as far as knowledge being gathered as time goes on, and this AI being fairly new as far as collecting these things, having a platform where all the religions actually discuss the old versus new earth. It's not possible, the amount of denominations there are in the Christian faith, for them to know what's being taught in the churches and to children. It doesn't collect the amount of private Christian schools that there are across this nation alone. It doesn't have anything as far as other countries and their Christian schools, ministries that have spread far and far across the earth, who help, third world countries come to schools that they don't have money to go to schools, so they're helping them to go to school, and they're teaching them about the Bible. So they don't have any of that data to actually know what is being taught in those types of schools, right? Here's an example of evidence of the fact that the data is limited for AI to know which specific churches believe what. There are thousands of denominations across the earth of the Christian faith. They list just a few. Several Christian denominations, when asked what Christian denominations believe in young earth according to the Bible, several Christian denominations, particularly with fundamentalist and evangelical movements, hold a young earth creationism view, believing the earth is only a few thousand years old. This view is based on a literal interpretation of the Genesis creation account, where God created the world in 6 24-hour days. And then it just lists Seventh-day Adventists, other denominations, which could be billions of people. It's so vague. It says, well, not exclusively a denomination. Some denominations within independent evangelicism and those that emphasize a literal reading of Scripture may also hold young earth views. So basically, they don't know, right? Literally, there are thousands of denominations. Thousands. When asked, how many Christian denominations are there in the earth? It states there are over 45,000 Christian denominations globally. So basically, any person that wants to create a church can create a church and give it a name. That's considered a denomination, especially if they branch out and create a second church in that same name. So this includes various Protestant denominations, Eastern Oriental Orthodoxy, Roman Catholic Church. Some estimates predict the number will continue to increase in the coming years. Estimates range from around 33,000 to over 47,000 denominations, depending on the specific study and how denominations are defined. As I showed you earlier, when I asked specifically which denominations believe in early earth, as you noticed, Baptist was not included. It was just vaguely saying, some other. So it kind of minimized the amount of people that actually believe in young earth. And it's important because when they say mainstream belief is in the evolution, then that's not accurate, is it? So here's just one out of, dozens of thousands of denominations. Baptist. Significant number of the Southern Baptists hold the young earth creationist view. There are estimated 100 million Baptists worldwide. Amish are conservative Christians with strong beliefs in the Bible. It claims that some of them adhere to the young earth, but not all. Yet when you see this article here, Christianity Stack Exchange from 2016, it says, what do the Amish believe with respect to creationism? Most Amish believe in a young earth and a 6-day creation. I am closely associated with the Amish and I speak from experience. So where is AI getting their information about the Amish? This is from 6 years ago. It says, what is the stance on the Amish and Mennonites? We believe in a young earth creation. Similar belief is promoted by Institute for Creation Research or Creation Ministries International. When asked about, does the Mormons believe the earth is 6,000 years old? And this comes up. Some verses in the standard works raise questions about the compatibility of scriptural teachings and scientists' current understanding of organic evolution. One such verse in Doctrine and Covenants describes the temporal existence of the earth as 7,000 years old. Then, also, when asked specifically, how old is earth according to LDS? This is from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Beasts have spirits and will dwell in eternal felicity. This earth has a temporal existence of 7,000 years. Now keep in mind, they do have an extra book in addition to the Bible, but they do adhere to the Bible, even though they have their additional Book of Mormon, which I don't adhere to, but just overall, just stating them as a people who believe in Jesus Christ, so I would count them as Christians, even if they have, a different extra Bible or whatever doctrine that they believe in. So I'm just giving them as an example, because they are a large amount of people in the earth. Not as large as Baptists, but nonetheless, and they had a global membership of 17.2 million people. When it comes to Jews, while there may be some who accept the theory of evolution, it says that very religious Jews often believe in the young earth creationism. Lutherans generally hold a young earth creationist view. There are roughly 70 to 90 million Lutherans worldwide. There's over 2 million Mennonites worldwide. There are about 400,000 Amish worldwide. In the United States, according to AI, approximately 40% of adults believe in a young earth. That would mean 60%, which is 20% more, don't. That would be given because the schools have been allowed to teach science and not even being allowed to be countered an optional belief system such as the young creationists, the evidence that they have put forth, such as the things that they have recently discovered, to give them the option of what to believe. They have been given tests on answers that they have to answer in a certain way to get correct to pass. So they've really not even been presented with other evidence that is now being recognized by AI. Now, according to this article, in 2019, as many as 47% have taken a creationist view of human origins throughout Gallup's 37-year trend. And that's even with forced education of ideas pushed forth by science without any countering argument of evidence that even scientists cannot even have answer for, that even AI is now recognizing. Such as genetic entropy pointing to a young creation, such as aging by population. Listen to this, and AI even recognizes this as fact. Anthropology, human population growth. We can calculate years of human existence with the population doubling every 150 years, which is a very conservative figure, to get an estimate of what the world's population should be after any given period of time. A biblical age of the Earth, about 6,000, is consistent with the numbers yielded by such a calculation. In contrast, even a conservative evolutionary age of 50,000 years comes out to a staggering impossible high figure of 10 to the 99th power, greater than the number of atoms in the universe. Clearly, claiming humans inhabited the Earth for tens of thousands of years is absurd. So then, when you state we can calculate the years of human existence with population doubling every 150 years, it says yes, a population doubling every 150 years is a reasonable and conservative estimate, as discussed in the Creation.com article, Human Population Growth. Using this as a model, it can be shown that the current world population could be reached in a time frame consistent with the biblical age of the Earth, which is around 6,000 years. Without being conclusive, the AI overview, if you will, has recognized that there is a problem in the scientific community dealing with the soft tissue of a T-Rex femur that was discovered in 2005, having flexible connective tissue, branching blood vessels, and even intact cells, which is a problem with their ideology of fossilization versus Earth's age. So it says the statement, evolution is scrambling, is a fossilized Tyrannosaurus rex femur with flexible connective tissue, branching blood vessels, and even intact cells, as he generally is referred to that discovery of the soft tissue with the T-Rex femur. It did cause a stir in the scientific community. This finding challenged the understanding of how long soft tissues could survive in fossilized remains, particularly in bones dating back millions of years, and then gives a more detailed look at the discovery and its implications. And then it goes into the story about Mary Schweitzer and her team at the North Carolina State University discovering that tissue and potential cell structures within a so-called 70 million year old T-Rex femur. It was significant because the soft tissues like blood vessels and cells were thought to be highly susceptible to decay, would not survive fossilization for such extended periods. Particularly the presence of collagen and potential red blood cells generated considerable debate and sparked ongoing research into the preservation of organic matter and fossils. Now imagine that. These scientists who've taught that they have got it all figured out were whipped back into research because they lost the argument and had to go do some research so that they can present argument. Imagine that. And it was left with them still doing research. What I have coined is a Mississippi mud and a Big Bang dud is basically the age of the Mississippi River Delta. Here is AI's overview of the Mississippi River Delta, the mathematical formula of finding the age according to AI is about 10,000 years old. Correction, more like 8,000 years old. Now, in finding answers in as far as young Earth versus the older Earth arguments, there may be some answers that AI would be, well, there's just debate. There's different opinions or beliefs, but then there's some things that are definitely more problematic for scientists than there are for those who believe in young Earth. The bottom line is, when it comes to faith, we are expected to believe without having proof, because that's faith, right? We believe because we have the Holy Spirit, we are saved. However, we are told that knowledge shall increase in the latter days. And for decades, in this particular nation specifically, scientists have been allowed, based on some of the things that they have learned, of which now they're struggling over and don't even have the answers yet too. They don't have all the answers. They just think that they do, right? And while some, as far as the red giant, okay, that is about the ancient astronomers recorded. Now this is recorded information that is known now. This is fact. Ancient astronomers did record that Sirius glowed red in the sky, yet now it's categorized as white. So obviously the evolutionists' opinions of the length of time to change our giant star into white dwarf star are incorrect. Because evolutionists teach that red giant stars change into white dwarf stars over millions of years. But they say that Sirius is an example of a red star becoming white within the past 2,000 years because ancient astronomers recorded Sirius glowing red in the sky. They can't overcome that fact. They said, okay, but they're like, but this is not entirely accurate because, now keep in mind, this overview is annotated by scientists, but AI has to recognize that some ancient astronomical records, we're talking factual records, do describe Sirius as a reddish, but the modern observations try to rearrange history by classifying it as a blue-white star. So the only way for them to try to continue in their argument that's been proven incorrectly is to basically just reclassify it. But because AI goes by facts, AI has to admit that some ancient astronomical records do describe Sirius as reddish, and they cannot get around that. More detailed explanation. Ancient records. These are records that cannot be refuted. Like Ptolemy describes Sirius as reddish. They can only speculate as to why it would have appeared reddish. They don't have any fact or any evidence of why it was appearing and documented as reddish. They can only speculate. And speculation is not proof. And scientists are still using, for their theory of the age of the Earth, is carbon-14. The statement asserts in this that carbon-14 dating actually provides some of the strongest evidence for creation in a young Earth. That being because radiocarbon-14 cannot remain naturally in substances for millions of years because it decays relatively rapidly. For this reason, it can only be used to obtain ages in the ranges of tens of thousands of years. And the scientists do not give any reason of how this is not true. They just continue to use this particular type of dating. The limitations of carbon-14 dating: since it decays so quickly, it's not suitable for dating rocks or fossils that are millions or billions of years old. Other radiometric dating methods like potassium-40 dating are used to date much older materials. Creationists argue that the presence of carbon-14 in fossils and other materials, despite their purported ages of millions of years, contradicts geological and scientific so-called evidence. So, they are not able to overcome this, so instead all they do is basically have different theoretical arguments, but the problem is they're pushing their theory as proof in schools without being allowed the other theories, of which some of them are being forced back into research and not being able to disprove, not being even be allowed to be a part of the discussion in schools. Such as, the statement claims that the Earth's magnetic field decay rate as observed over the past 140 years would suggest a time frame of around 25,000 years or less for the planet to become uninhabitable due to the heat generated by electric currents in the Earth's core. The claim is part of a broader argument that Earth is relatively young, not billions of years old, suggested by scientific dating methods. The magnetic field decay. Studies of Earth's magnetic field show consistent decay rate, meaning the field is losing strength over time. This decay is attributed to the electric currents in the Earth's core, which are responsible for generating the magnetic field. The young Earth argument. Some scientists and researchers, particularly those with the creationist movement, use the rapid decay of the Earth's magnetic field as evidence for the young Earth. They argue the field is decaying at the current rate. The Earth could not be older than a few thousand or tens of thousands of years at the most. So, proponents of the young Earth argument suggest that if the Earth's magnetic field were to decay to zero, the heat generated by electric currents in the core would make the planet uninhabitable. Scientific evidence, including radiometric dating of rocks, and here we go. Radiometric dating, this is what they're using, and we've already just discussed the problem with radiometric dating. Oh, wait, I hadn't got to that part yet. The radiometric versus radiocarbon potassium-40 dating, which is what they fall back on, while useful for determining the age of rocks, faces challenges related to argon loss and excess argon contamination. Yet another problem with their theory. It can lead to inaccurate age estimates. Additionally, problems like contamination and inherent parent or daughter isotopes can also affect the accuracy of this dating method. Anyways, I could go on and on and on about the problems with the old age Earth, but the bottom line is AI overview, by pulling data of specific things, are finding, if you put them together, problems with what is being considered irrefutable evidence of science being forced upon the public and the children in our nation. So anywho, that's it for this one. I hope you have a blessed day.